My name is Ingrid Honkala, and my journey into spirituality, my journey into realizing who I am truly started when I was a little child. I had a near-death experience when I was close to 3 years old, and that opened for me the path of realizing my true nature. And the reason this accident happened, or this near death happened, is because my parents will leave very early in the morning and they will leave us at the care of a maid. I was born and raised in Bogota, Colombia, and it was very normal back then to leave the children with the maid. And then this lady really didn't pay much attention to us when my parents were not around. And early one morning when they left, my oldest sister, she was close to 4, and I decided, let's go play in the patio. In the house, there was a big tank, and the purpose of this tank was to collect water for hand washing clothes. And my sister and I found a ball in the patio and decided to play catch across the tank. We climbed the walls of the tank. She sat on the flat surface for scrubbing, and I went on the other side of the tank where I was leaning very precariously, like in this tank. And but we were having fun, so no problem. And at some point, my sister threw the ball. She didn't apply enough force, and the ball fell on the water and it was floating. I thought that I could grab it, and I leaned forward. And the moment I did, I lost my balance and fell in the tank. The first feeling when touching this water was the sense that this water was frigid cold. Like I said to you, I was born high up in the Andes, so the temperature in this water was frigid cold. And then after, like, pretty much this moment where I fell and I already lost just my breath with this water being so cold, now it was the realization of why I cannot breathe. When I was experiencing this whole moment of terror of why I cannot breathe, was when suddenly a miracle happened. And I went from that state of complete terror to one of absolute and complete peace. Calm, serenity. I didn't know what happened, but I just knew that I didn't need to escape the tank anymore. I didn't have to breathe. I didn't have to go anywhere. It was just a complete sense of feeling well. And then I always like to mention this because people always ask me, how can you remember if you were so young? And I like to answer this from the very beginning, because otherwise people keep the idea of how can you remember, and I always say, how can I forget? First, drowning is a very traumatic experience, and imagine passing from that state of terror to one of absolute well-being. That already is a huge contrast. Second, the tank where I drowned was a very dark space, and the last thing I saw with my eyes open was the darkness of the space. And then suddenly there was light, and I started to see light that was coming from below, and the light was soft, but it was able to illuminate the whole watery surrounding. So imagine now was this sense of from darkness now there is light. And the next thing is that being at the moment I was drowning, I could hear my heart. pounding in my chest. Imagine when you're afraid, when you are in a moment of altered state of adrenaline. My heart was pounding and I could hear it like a drum in my head. And the moment I went into that calmness, I experienced total silence. And it's what I call the silence behind the silence. And this silence came with such an amazing state of peace that even after the experience, I kept craving that silence, and I craved that silence for the rest of my life. And I will hide into closets, chapels, under the bed, wherever it was, because I wanted that silence back. So with this, I'm already telling you, like, how can I forget? Then it came, well, I'm in the tank and I am in this submerged, in this light. Suddenly I started to see bubbles, and the bubbles were also surrounded by light. And it was like by chasing these bubbles, because imagine now, like, wow, this is so cool, that I turned around, and it's when I saw a body in the water. And it's when I had this clear realization of, that is my body. And the thing is that I didn't feel afraid, I didn't feel surprised. It was the sense of familiarity, the sense of knowing that is my body. So when I saw this body, I made the decision right there, I'm not going back into that body. And I turned around and left the body behind. And when I turned around, I started to see flowers, and these flowers were blooming from nowhere. And it was like I was picked by the flowers. So even the sense of dimension disappeared, and I was just picked up. And I'm being carried. And I say it's like going back to the womb, where you don't have to do anything, you're just being done. And while I'm being carried, I am in the sense of complete relaxation, and I am experiencing bliss. And this is when, like, very, very sudden, in just a flash like that, I went from this state to finding myself floating above the maid. And she was in a room listening to soap operas in the radio. And she was completely unaware that something was happening to me. And floating above her, I just even say, oh, that's Maria. And since nothing happened there, in another blink, just like that, I appear on my mom's path. My mom didn't have a car, and she will walk every day to her bus station that was about 10 minutes away from home. And when she was close to her bus station, I now appear above her. And I can say that this encounter is miraculous, because this is, one, what validates the experience, and two, I think is what knocks everybody's socks away. And is that the moment, like, I'm floating above her, and the moment I said, oh, that's mom, she stopped. She did not give another step. She knew immediately that something was happening at home with one of her children. And she turned around and started to run back home. And I like to clarify that my mom, during those days, she had got a new job. And what is the idea of us human beings? I have to go to my new job, I cannot fail. But no, the call was such that my mom turned around. I have to say that my mom was a very intuitive person. But I also have to say that, and there's something that all of us should follow, and is that my mom listened to her intuition. So now she is running, and I look at her from above, and I just was wondering why mom is running. And the moment I am looking at mom, I saw in the distance a dog, and I love animals. And the moment I feel the desire to be in the dog with the dog, I am with the dog, and I just forgot all about my mom. I was wondering, yeah, why she's running, but now I'm with the dog, and I'm like, oh. And at that moment, I saw a park in the distance, and the moment I saw the park and I felt the desire to be in the park, I am in the park. So now it's just this cool realization that time and space as we know it had vanished, and I could be anywhere at any time. And I started to play this game of going places. And it was a really, really fun game when in another flash like that, suddenly I appeared in a realm that was made of pure, bright, intense, shiny light. And this was the first time in all my in my almost 3 years of life that I felt that I was home, that I was back home. It was that sense of being welcome, embraced, like cozy. And something incredible happened at this moment, and it was that although I had seen my body in the water, up to this point I didn't have the realization of what truly had happened. And it's when I realized, wow, I am not that body, I am not that. And it's when I realized myself as a being of light, when I said, I think is the movement between body consciousness and soul consciousness. And although I was still having a sense of self, I started to feel like if I was dissolving with the whole. And even that sense of self disappeared when I experienced what I call nothingness. Some people call it non-self, some people call it vacuum, but for me, it was that sense of nothing, because it was nothing that at that state there was no narrative. I don't have narrative, there's no description, there's no meaning, there's no movement, there's no color, there's nothing that I could even use with words. I think is the most difficult part of the experience to explain, because there's no words to explain it. The only words I could use is absolute and pure awareness, consciousness, beingness, pure presence. When I am in this state of being, my mother finally arrived home. And the other thing that is incredible about all this is that my mom knew exactly where to go. And she directed herself to the back of the house. And there was my sister, and she told my mom, Ingrid is there and I cannot get her. And my mom jumped in the tank, she got me out, and incredibly my mom worked with children. So look at how amazing things are. And she was trained to do CPR for children. She said that when she got me out of the tank, I was like a raggedy doll, no pulse, no breathing, my lips blue, my fingers blue pale. And then she started to do all she knew to revive me. And then at that moment, I was so disconnected from this body that I didn't feel anything. And what happened next is that suddenly it's like a jump from the tallest building in the world. And there was nothing I could do to stop this. It was like the sense of like falling, but I was resisting. It was like, no. And then I knew I was back in the body. It's like I was being pulled, vacuum back. And I knew I was back when all the feelings of that lack of expansive state of being. Now I'm trapped back in the little box, and the sense of coldness from what had happened in the water, and the sense of sickness, and the sense of not feeling well, all that sense of freedom. And now I'm just back in this body, make me feel very, very angry. Another thing that happened is that I clearly came with an awareness I didn't have before. So when I look at my parents, it was the sense of, these are not just my parents. I have experienced the sense of oneness connection, so I felt them as my equal. So I became very rebellious because I thought, why do I have to listen to these people? The other thing was that I looked at myself, and it was clear to me, I am not this child. I am not this body. Like I said to you during my near death, I had the realization of being a being of light, of being soul conscious. So when I look at the body, I said, I'm not this. And I never after that felt like I was a child again. And the other thing, I could not relate with other children. When I look at other children, it was the sense of, what is happening to these people? They don't know anything. And I even was feeling the same thing even with the adults. So I entered into a very, very difficult time of my life. And even I would go and look at myself in the mirror and come back to my mom, and I would cry and say, Mom, you don't understand. I am not this. And what happened is that, hey, of course, we need balance. I could not be the child that is left forever. So one day I'm taking a shower, and I'm all relaxed in the shower, when suddenly one of these blue orbs, one of these lights presented in the bathroom as a blue, immense, shiny light. And then when I see this blue light in the bathroom, now I said, oh, wow, now the beings of light are here. And just their presence brought me to feel the sense of being home. And with their presence, I started to feel, oh, now I want to play with my sisters. I want to eat. I started to feel like more the sense that I could belong here. And many, 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 many years later, that teaching, that brought me to the realization of a teaching, of knowing that home was not a place. Now that I was feeling so well here, is that home, I don't have to go somewhere. Home is not a place. Home is a state of being. So feeling that now I was here at home, I started to feel a lot better. And although the beings of light didn't say or do anything, in that presence, again, I felt that I could now function much better here. And at the beginning, I could only feel, see, I could smell. And the smell was like the one of flowers. And the moment I started to hear was someday I was being called to go to eat dinner. And because I feel very disconnected with my name and my persona, I would throw sometimes big tantrums when they call my name. And this day they was calling me to eat dinner. They were calling me Ingrid, Ingrid, and I wouldn't go. So the lady came and said, Ingrid, we're calling you for dinner. And I turned to her and I said, don't call me like that. That's not my name. And then the lady said, then what is your name? How should we call you? And I turned and I said, I do not need one. And of course, they aggravated about my behavior, sent me to bed. I was crying, and it's when for the first time I heard voice. And the voice said to me, it is going to take time for them to understand that names are not needed in the realm of the light. That moment, it was the sense, it was that realization of names are not needed as you already know it. And it was that feeling of like, I'm not crazy now, I know why I don't need a name. Yeah, in the realm of the spirit, labels are not needed. But of course, later in my life, I understood that names are important, they carry energy. As a human experience, they're very beautiful, but it was knowing I don't really need a label. And the other thing, they said to me, you're never alone. People will be in your path to help you and to guide you. And yes, that's exactly the way it happened. And thankfully, the first person that validated my experiences and what was happening to me was my mother. And what happened is that when I went to school, I was 5 years old by now. I have, thankfully, more language, more way of express what I was experiencing. And since I was told not to talk, but I wasn't told not to paint, I started to paint beings of light everywhere. And I was painting them in my notebooks and my books everywhere. And the teacher, very curious, came to me and asked, is this the sun and the stars? Because it was such a repetitive behavior. And I said, no, these are my friends, the beings of light. And that's when the teacher thought, oh, there's problems here. She thought that I was having imaginary friends. And they already thought that I was different because I kept myself separate and I was more observing than anything else. They called my parents. My mother came to school. And as they were looking at the drawings, the paintings, is when we also learned that I could see what we call auras, because I was painting very clearly all things and all beings with aura. And as the mom and the teacher were looking and discussing the pictures, I look at my mom with that need of validation. And I said, Mom, these are the colors that we wear, and these are my friends, the beings of light. And this is when my mom just made her big mom eyes and look at me like, be silent. I understood the message. I went quiet. And it's when she said to the teacher, this is just a phase. Everything will be all right. We left. I was so sad, imagine. And it's when on the way home, my mom revealed to me that she could also see things that nobody could. That was incredible. She said that since she was little, she could see what we call spirits. But she said that, and she validated what the beings of light said. She said that it was best to be quiet because people wouldn't understand. She said that people fear things that they don't see, that they don't understand. So it was best to be quiet. So of course, following what I already have learned from the beings of light and my mom, I decided to be silent. When I was 24 years old, I had a second near-death experience. And this experience was very, very important because it brought me to realize that, wow, the second experience was a motorcycle accident. And in this experience, I had the realization that pain belonged to the body, because the very moment I was about to have the accident, before the motorcycle crashed, I was already out of the body. And when I'm out of the body, what later surprised me the most was the lack of pain. There was no pain. There was no fear whatsoever. There was again this complete feeling of peace, openness, connections, and home. What we call heaven. Like, I'm ready to go home. And again, being in the presence of the light. I will not talk about this too in depth because it takes long, but later in my life, it was an important tool, because every time people ask me if their loved ones suffer when they were in a brutal accident like that, a traumatic accident, I know through my experience and the experience of many other people that have had NDEs, that there's no suffering, there's no pain. So this was another important experience. So these things kept happening in my life, but as I kept breaking my relationship with the depthness of that I was, even though by the age of 40 almost, I was a very successful scientist, I was a very depressed person, because one, I was always having the sense I wanted to go back to heaven, and second, I had cut my relationship with the beings of light and my depthness. I always kept sensing that sense of wanting to go back there, until I had my last near-death experience that happened only 2 years ago in 2022. And what happened is that I was in a surgery, and this time, compared with the other two, this is the very first time that I was asked if I wanted to stay or I wanted to go. And when I heard if I wanted to stay, I'm like, of course I want to stay. I'm finally in heaven. I'm finally here. And then when I heard the words, oh, you want to go back, is when I realized, what? And I said, wait a minute, is this a test? And I am in this realm of the light once again, different from the first and the second experience. Like, I didn't need too much of content or narrative or nothing. I was already in the light. It's important to mention that. And in this state of awareness and in the light is when I said, is this a test? I said, because if God is everywhere, because I could feel the presence of God everywhere. And everything is a manifestation of consciousness. So where is here and where is there? And it's when I said there is no here and there is not there. And the only thing that crossed my mind at that moment was to say, keep me where I can serve God the most. And it's when I came back. And from that moment on, is when that absolute clarity of knowing that home is not a place, is a state of being, came to me in its fullness. Another thing that I always say, even after my first near death, when I was a little, when people ask me how could I remember if I was so little, I always kept saying, it's like the door for me never closed. It's like the door for me never closed. And it's when the beings of light said to me, Ingrid, of course the door never closed, because there is no door. What we call the kingdom of heaven, home, source, the Father, God, is always here and now. We are the ones that, due to beliefs, due to conditionings, due to experiences, due to whatever, we create a door and close the door. But what Jesus called the kingdom of heaven is here and now within us always. We just have to remember. When I ask the beings of light, many people ask me, what is purpose? And when I ask what is purpose and what is mission, the teaching was, your true purpose, the only true purpose is to remember who you truly are. That you are the light of awareness, that you are soul. Go back to soul consciousness. You are the light of awareness, and your mission is to shine that light. Shine your light wherever you are, in whatever job you do, in whatever place you are. And you know, my last experience brought me to the realization it's not about near death, it's about near life. So live your life to the fullest, shine your light, even if you're a mom, a carpenter, a doctor, a pharmacist, whatever you do, shine your light. And before we go, I want to leave you with one last beautiful teaching. There's just many teachings. I have met many beings of light, and my connection with God. I think the main thing we come here to do is remember that we are soul, and remember our Father. Remember our connection with our source. Remember our origin. Remember who we are. Thank you so much, and it's a pleasure to share with you. Bye.